And then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lisette Camacho, our Deputy City Manager.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisette Camacho. I'm the Deputy City Manager for Tempe. I'm also the CFO. Joining me today is Chief Deputy City Manager Greg Ruiz, and we also have Deputy City Manager Keith Berg. Our City Manager, Rosa Inchausti, will be joining us a little bit later. We also have a team of directors here with us today to answer any questions you have specific to the projects. They're the experts in their field, and this information is, this presentation is for information only. And we really want to be able to answer any questions you have about the bond questions. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. So it's important for the City of Tempe to get a sense of what's important to our residents. On an annual basis, we do a community survey. And in the last community survey that we had, the top 3 priorities of our residents are services for individuals experiencing homelessness, condition of streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure, police services, and safety. The bond questions that you'll be considering at the November election is aligned with the top 3 priorities of the residents of Tempe. Issuing general obligation bonds, or you'll hear me refer to them as GO bonds, help cities by providing funding to fund capital investments. This is a common tool that cities and towns use to fund capital projects. Tempe is a well-managed and financially stable city, and that's reflected. Oh, hang on. Is my slide lagging?
You're on how bonds help cities?
Okay, that's the correct one, yes. So yes, Tempe is a very well-managed and financially stable city, and that's reflected in our AAA ratings with GO bonds. This is the highest and best credit score you can get from rating agencies like Standard & Poor or S&P, Fitch, and Moody's. The revenues collected from secondary property taxes can only be used to repay voter-authorized debt. So that means that secondary property taxes can only be used to repay GO bond debt. They cannot be used for operating costs like salaries and benefits. Again, secondary property taxes can only be used to repay GO bonds. Another benefit of issuing bonds to fund capital projects is that the taxpayers who benefit from the use of the improvements are the one paying for the cost of the projects. Bonds improve our city by providing funding for systematic investments in our infrastructure. So the bond program that the city has is investment to maintain our existing assets. So taking care of what we currently have, which ultimately results in improving the health and safety of the residents of Tempe and our community. The city maintains a comprehensive asset management system. We review the life cycle and condition of our assets on an annual basis. The city also develops a 5-year CIP that's updated and approved by council on an annual basis. The city's capital improvement plan aligns with the 5 council strategic priorities, which includes ensuring a safe and secure community through public safety, enhancing quality of life for all Tempe residents through investments in neighborhoods, parks, and human services, sustainable growth and development, and making sustainable long-term generational investments in technology and infrastructure, developing strong community connections through open government, and that's why we're here, and also ensuring financial stability and vitality of the city. Tempe does a bond election every 4 years. The last election we had was in 2020. And Tempe also issues tax-exempt bonds every year. So the amount that we issue every year depends on the cost of the projects that we have happening on that year. So just depends on the amount that's needed for the year. And we do have bond attorneys and also investment bankers that assist with issuing the bonds for the city. So in the next few slides, we'll talk about secondary property taxes. So when you look at your total property tax bill, what you'll see is total taxes assessed by multiple jurisdictions. The city is one of those jurisdictions. And as you can see on this slide, the amount of property taxes that goes to the city is about 24%. The largest component are taxes from the schools at 47%. And the remaining 29% are taxes assessed by community colleges, special districts, and the county. So there are limits on the amount of debt that the city can issue that's imposed by the state, the Arizona state law. There are also self-imposed limitations that the city has. We have a property tax stabilization policy that controls the increases in primary and secondary property taxes. So we do have 3 bond questions in the November election. The bond questions, again, align with the top priorities of our residents, which are services for individuals experiencing homelessness, condition of our city streets, police services and safety, neighborhoods, and city infrastructure. The first bond question is to provide funding to enhance community safety through public safety and roadway improvements for $301 million. Question number 2 would provide funding to improve quality of life in Tempe neighborhoods for $248.5 million. Question number 3 would provide funding to increase the supply of affordable housing in Tempe. Each question is separate, and voters can vote yes or no to each of the questions. Here's an example of the property tax impact on a median single-family residential home in Tempe, valued at $410,000. So the $410,000 is the full cash value from the Maricopa County Assessor's Office. So for this property, current property taxes totals about $1,800. As you can see, the amount that goes to the city is the $432 that you see here. And as I mentioned earlier, the largest components come from the schools and community colleges. And you can see the taxes are $1,000 and $61. And then the remaining $314 goes to the county and special districts. So based on our plan of financing and the fact that we have existing general obligation bonds that will be repaid before the new bonds are issued, and the portion of the existing secondary property taxes that was repaying the existing general obligation bonds will be redirected to repaying the new bonds. The total impact on the city property taxes is expected to increase by approximately $74. So what that means is that city taxes that you see, the $432, that would go up to $506. So now we'll show you 3 videos on the bond questions. So the first one is bond question number 1.
Question 1 will fund fire and police infrastructure, as well as roadway, sidewalk, and signage improvements. Here are some of the projects that would be funded through a yes vote on question 1. Tempe residents have told us that safe, well-maintained streets are among their top priorities. This question will fund street improvements citywide over the next 4 years, ensuring that each of Tempe streets is in good condition according to the city's Pavement Quality Index. Tempe has more than 1,300 lane miles of roads. Right now, nearly 600 miles of them are rated fair to poor. Bond question 1 would accelerate the improvement of Tempe streets, bringing them all to an excellent rating over the next 4 years. To make our streets safer, this question would provide funding to add street signal visibility, safety corridors, left turn signals, sidewalk improvements, and more. It also provides for right-of-way improvements to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Keeping people safe requires investing in our public safety. This includes replacing fire engines and equipment that has passed its useful lifespan. It also means being able to respond to emergencies faster. This funding will build a new public safety facility and fire station, as well as a new police station. The facility will house a new emergency operations center and add new capabilities, such as hazmat response, from Fire Station 2 near Hardy and Southern Avenue.
As you saw in the video, if bond question number 1 is approved by the voters, it would provide funding for capital projects like building a new police station in North Tempe, funding for major renovations of fire stations and replacement of aging emergency response vehicles, funding for infrastructure improvements that reduce fatal and serious injury crashes, and funding for infrastructure improvements that make the city more accessible to individuals with disability. Bond question number 1 also includes improvements to our street pavement. As you saw in the video, the city of Tempe has 1,300 lane miles of streets, and about 50% or 600 miles are rated poor to fair. If bond question number 1 is approved, it would accelerate the rehabilitation or reconstruction of city street pavement to improve the quality from poor to excellent in 4 years. So in the map that you're seeing here, if bond question number 1 passes, the map on the right shows the improvements on the street pavement. And if bond question number 1 does not pass, you see the projects that would be funded to the left of the map.
Question 2 addresses several items that affect quality of life in Tempe neighborhoods. Residents told us in the 2023 community survey that improving the quality of their neighborhoods was one of their top priorities. This question responds to that request. Projects that would be funded through a yes vote on this question include Ramada and Park Playground renovations over the next 5 years, and ADA enhancements to ensure everyone can enjoy them, new trees for neighborhood, community, and regional parks, and new, more sustainable irrigation systems. Lighting and field updates for Tempe's community sports facilities. We'll also add electric vehicle charging stations in an effort to help combat climate change and the urban heat island effect. A yes vote would provide funding to protect some of our endangered historic properties and maintain and improve our desert preserves like Hayden Butte, Loma del Rio, and restore historic Double Butte Cemetery. The bond question also includes funding for cybersecurity to better protect Tempe residents' data and our city assets. A yes vote would support upgrades to downtown Tempe streetscape, funding new infrastructure for the first time in 40 years.
If bond question number 2 is approved by the voters, it would provide funding for projects like replacement of equipment and safety surfacing of our park playgrounds, replacement or renovation of our park ramadas, new trees in neighborhoods, parks, and sports complexes, also funding to preserve our historic properties, funding for shade and green stormwater infrastructure, and electric vehicle charging infrastructure.
The lack of affordable housing is a state and national problem. The City of Tempe wants to foster an inclusive environment where everyone, regardless of age or circumstance, can find a place to live. This bond election gives voters a voice in funding for Tempe's affordable housing efforts. A yes vote on bond question 3 would provide funding to buy land that could be developed into affordable housing. Specifically with these funds, Tempe could increase the availability of affordable housing for vulnerable populations, including seniors at low income levels, people with disabilities, and families with children at risk of homelessness. This investment would accelerate the vision of Hometown for All, the city's effort to foster a safe, livable, and accessible community for residents of all ages.
So as you saw in the video, if bond question number 3 is approved by the voters, it would provide funding to purchase land for development of affordable housing. I also wanted to say that the proceeds from the bonds that are issued can only be used for the types of projects that are outlined in each of the bond question. So for example, you wouldn't be able to use bond proceeds for the voter authorization in bond question number 3 for projects in bond question number 2. So what happens if the bond questions don't pass? So if the questions don't pass, the types of projects you saw in the video and also in this presentation would not be built. They can also either be scaled down or deferred to reflect the city's available funding, and there would be no new taxes. Here are some important election dates. So on October 1st, the voter information pamphlet will be mailed. Early ballots are mailed on October 9th. In-person voting will also begin on October 9th, and the special bond election is on November 5th.